Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Ambrose Blowfield back here again from the Sales Mastery Company. Today we're talking about negotiation techniques, negotiation strategies, and some negotiation strategies that you want to employ into your life, into your business, into your leadership. And of course, most of our customers, given that we're the Sales Mastery Company, are indeed in sales roles. So these are key negotiation strategies for you to apply in your day-to-day business. Today, I'm going to share with you 10 things to consider in negotiation overall, but I'm going to pre-frame those 10 areas, and I'm going to post-summarize at the end. This session should only be 10 to 15 minutes long. If you are live, feel free to send through messages live in case I can get back to them. As always, if you have any challenges accessing the workbook, please email admin@salesmasterycompany.com, specifically asking for the LinkedIn Live Key Negotiation Strategies workbook. We'll get a copy through to you based on that. And if you're watching this in recorded form or on YouTube or one of our other social media channels, well done for taking action. Well done for taking 10 to 15 minutes just to find a way to add value to your business. Now, again, there's a welcome note on the inside cover of your workbook if you've printed it out. Let's get clear on what negotiation is. The first comment I want to make clear is that no matter what your title is, well, you are going to be in negotiation. You have to negotiate to get your job. You have to negotiate to get married if you're married. You have to negotiate to get attention at school from school teachers. You have to negotiate to be part of a sports team. You have to negotiate, and you have to negotiate again and again and again. Even back to when you were a baby, you had to negotiate to get someone to change your nappy at some point. You verbalize your discontent with the situation when you had a full nappy, and of course along came a big person and you inarticulately expressed the fact that you will continue to cry, which is a very one-sided confrontational negotiation strategy. But you pretty much explained, this is what I want done, and they fixed it, and you went, great, I'll shut up now and get on with my life. So the point I want to make is you're always going to be in negotiation, whether you like it or not, and you are very natural at it, because without having any training, you were able to do it as a baby. So that's very, very important. But put really simply, as we train as part of our Sales Academy and our Sales Mastery program, and even for our Sales Manager programs, negotiation typically involves some degree of give and take. It's got to be mutually beneficial. What we often use is the expression of it's trying to create a win-win outcome. As Stephen Covey said in his amazing book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he said, any relationship that ends up win by one party, lose by the other, eventually that relationship ends up lose-lose. Why? Because those that lose will probably find a way to nitpick or undermine you at some stage in the future. They still have lost, but they found a way to make you lose in the future. So it's important for us to keep that in mind. Likewise, we've got to think about the forums of negotiation. What we're finding more and more is people go through the debate over, if I have to negotiate with my supplier, or if I have to negotiate with my team members, or if I have to negotiate with my key customers or prospective customer, where and how should I negotiate? So this question precedes even the conversation about what techniques and strategies we're going to employ. At a very base level of strategy, we've got to think about, well, face to face, there tends to be more goodwill, more rapport, because we occupy the same physical space. We get to shake hands and eyeball one another. So there's more of a physical connection. There's more of an emotional connection there. So of course, if it's something that needs to be reasoned and debated, and you're going to get goodwill and build some leverage of rapport, then of course, face to face is better. The next best form of communication to have that personal connection, of course, is going to be via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. The next level is obviously going to be by phone. And then, of course, comes text message and more commonly email. One of the challenges in email negotiation is, of course, both parties or either party can very quickly step away from the negotiation process and put in a stall. So when you think about power in a relationship, which is something you have to think about a lot when you think about negotiating power, one of the things to remember, please, is the fact that if one party has more time urgency or time pressure on them, then they will probably be in a weak situation if you're trying to negotiate via email, because negotiating via email tends to be long and drawn out, and either party could just stall and declare, I never got the email, I never read the email, I didn't have time to process the email. So please think about how you're negotiating and where the power is. That's something that, real experts in this negotiating area tend to think about a lot and coach teams on a lot. Now, At a very base level, also, we've got here as a checklist. And as I go through this checklist, think about a current situation you're facing and which one of these 10 techniques you're going to try in that circumstance. Something when we're teaching our persuasive selling processes, we take people through a 2-day process and they actually plan a real meeting with an actual real client. So as I go through this topic, I'd like you to think about a real negotiation with a real client or a real supplier or a real colleague or a real family member or friend. Equally, as I go through this topic, I also want you to think, do I have the skills and the capacity to do this technique, or is that something I need to go and work on? And like all things, as it says down there in point number 8, practice to become an expert. You don't just become an expert by choosing to be an expert, no different to learning how to drive or how to speak a foreign language. You have to learn it and you have to apply it again and again and again. How do people suggest that you learn a foreign language the best way possible? Full immersion, meaning learn it, practice it again and again and again. I remember as a 9-year-old being sent to the south of France by my parents with 2 of my best friends on a French summer camp. And of course, 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever the duration was on the south coast of France, just speaking French every single day, even to one another, though they were American born, just speaking French one time. That was the only language you could speak at the end of that, full immersion. It's important to think about that. Practice in order to become an expert. Don't just assume you'll learn it and then you'll become an expert. You've got to learn and practice. And that applies to not just negotiation, but most parts of life. So first thing to get right, this is a non-negotiable factor when trying to negotiate, let's say with a client, is you need to know A, what are you trying to achieve, and B, below what level is it better for you to walk away. Now, in any negotiation, both parties can always walk away. That's fully within your rights, it's fully within their rights. So don't go into any negotiation without A, knowing what your ideal negotiation position is going to be, and B, the barrier, the bottom of it all, where you say, if they ask for a price lower than this, we're walking away. Or if they ask payment terms below this, we're walking away. So you've got to have your walkaway terms done in advance. So therefore, when you're negotiating with them by phone or face-to-face or via webcam or even via email, then you know that if they demand beyond that, you're walking, and it's already predetermined. You don't need to be emotional about that. You simply need to walk away. Number 2, there's a thing called anchoring. It's talked a lot about in neurolinguistic programming and also in other forms of psychology. And this is something that's changed. 20, 30, 40 years ago, a lot of negotiating trainers would say, hey, hold back information until they've spoken first. But a lot of psychologists have studied the fact that if you are the first person to speak, where you say, buy this product at this price and these payment terms and this delivery timing, then typically you're anchoring that first, and anything that's said next will be compared against that. So another good rule of thumb that's changed in the last 20 years, be the first to speak or the first to make an offer. However, sometimes your customer or your supplier or whoever you're negotiating with has learned anchoring, so they will deliberately get their first foot in saying, we want to buy X product under X payment terms at this price. In which case you've got to learn the technique of re-anchoring, which is to acknowledge that they've spoken and then to reinforce as quickly as possible what your terms are. That's a technique I don't have time to go into today. Anchoring is the best thing you can do. Re-anchoring is the second best thing you can do if they anchor first. Number 4, trade-offs, otherwise known as concession factors. One thing you've got to understand in negotiation is you're typically going to have to compromise in some degree, but what you need to assess as a team is, what are we prepared to compromise on? And just like we said with the walk away terms, what are we not prepared to compromise on? Not everything costs you as much as the perceived value it's going to be. For obviously someone selling a car, it might be the plush leather seats might not cost them that much, but it might feel a lot better to the customer. So therefore, there's a bit of a gain by conceding leather seats, for example. So again, think about those factors. Next up, you've got to be positive. One of the biggest mistakes made by anybody, it could be an employee asking for a pay rise, it could be a staff member asking for extended leave, and it could be a salesperson trying to negotiate better terms or better prices with a customer. We often get nervous, so we don't think positive, we think negative, or we think nervous. And that, of course, is going to undermine you in every way, shape, or form. So it's important to keep that in mind. Next up, you've got to be articulate in the way you communicate it, and you're trying to develop value or build value. There's a couple of things there. Number 1, negotiation is not the time to fudge over things, to go, yeah, you know what I mean, or be dismissive of it. You've got to be clear. You've got to be concise. If you were nervous to negotiate, Remember, the other party might be just as nervous as you. But when I say building value, make sure that when you find commonalities or common ground, you're building on that, because that way you're building value in a relationship and you're building goodwill in the relationship. It's very important. At the same time, especially if both parties are likely nervous, try to keep it light. What I mean by that is try not to take it too serious. Try not to frown too much. Try not to tend to screw your face up unless that's part of your negotiation techniques. And even then, they tend not to work in the long term. But don't be afraid to even every now and again dispel the challenge and the urgency and the passion in this heated moment possibly, and actually talk to them and say, hey, look, this is a bit of a challenge, isn't it? Or look, I hope we can get through this. Or hey, it'll be great once we get through this, won't it? That can really change that. I remember myself in my early pre-sales career when I was interviewed in my final year at university to join Procter & Gamble. It was a job I really, really wanted to go and get. I knew there wasn't anyone bigger or better I could join in the UK at that time for sales or marketing roles. And I remember in the second round interview of 2 hours long with two senior sales directors, I remember sitting down when they asked me for my fifth example of a time when I'd led a team and achieved success, or fifth example of complex problem solving. And as a university student, yes, I've been working for the age of 10, but I didn't have too much life experience outside of education and holiday jobs and maybe a bit of international travel. The reality was, as I was sitting there thinking, I haven't got a fifth example, and they wanted a fifth example. And I remember taking control of the conversation by going to that point of injecting some humor. I said, wow, they're quite complex, these, so I think said it's quite challenging, some of these interview questions. And they looked at each other to go, well, we didn't expect that. We expected an answer. We expected you to say you didn't have an answer. I said, look, is it okay if we just park that one and I'll think about it when you answer your other questions and we come back to it later on? And I took back control of that conversation by keeping it light rather than going, oh, look, I'm so sorry, I don't have a fifth example. Thankfully, 20 minutes later, I did have a fifth example. Anyway, practice, as we said, is what we need to do to get better in all parts of our life. Obviously, learn, coach, practice, learn, coach, practice. Play the game. It's important for us to remember that negotiating, especially in a sales setup, no different to negotiating with a supplier or with a staff member, whether it's a manager or subordinate, it's a game. Negotiation is a game in the realm of human relationships and in the realm or area of communication. It's just one aspect of the game. It should never be the only aspect of the game, and nor it is the make or break of your entire career, your ability to negotiate. However, these are great skills to develop. You'd never have had your nappy changed after all if you couldn't negotiate. But it is a game, and when you're a child, you see things as a game, and when you're an adult, you start to become really weighted down and emotional about what's the impact going to be. If you're a bit lighthearted around it and treat it as a game within the game of life or the game of business or the game of selling or the game of communication, you're likely to get better off. And then likewise, negotiate in good faith. Assume that what they're telling you is the truth. And if your gut says it's not, investigate it later on. But while you're in the conversation with the other party, act in good faith. Do the right thing so that you can sleep at night, no matter what they're doing at their end that needs to be investigated later. So there's 10 techniques for you to think about strategically in a situation you've got right now, and also 10 techniques for you to master. Now, finally, an area that I find too many businesses do not do. Number one, the application is after you've negotiated, sit down with your colleague who is involved in that conversation, or sit down by yourself, maybe with your manager, and talk through what worked and what didn't work. Regardless of what the outcome was of it, there's always a post-mortem. There's huge value in self-assessing. A high-end athlete at the end of every competition, every meet, every event stops and analyzes how was their performance. That's what they do. That's what we should do. Very important. The second area to spin off from that is when you lose a customer or lose an opportunity or lose a negotiation or lose a project, there's always an opportunity for you to conduct a post-mortem. That should not be finger pointing and judgment based, and certainly not emotional. It is rational conversation about what did we do right and what could we learn for next time. So finally, just as we wrap up at the end of this 15 minutes, this topic came, as many of it did, from our Sales Manager program, our Sales Mastery program, and of course our Sales Mastery Academy. If you or someone you know there really wants to smash through their glass ceiling and achieve amazing growth in the year ahead, please book in for a scale-up call with us, or simply send us an email to admin@salesmasterycompany.com. We've written and delivered over 300 courses over the years. I'm sure we've got a program suitable to you or anybody who wants to get better, not just in negotiation, but in all parts of sales management or sales. Once again, I'm Ambrose Blowfield. We're the Sales Mastery Company. As always, feel free to share this to as many people you think need to improve their skills and confidence in negotiation. And finally, be sure to take action. Bye for now. Hello there, Ambrose here again to say thank you for watching this video. As always, I want to implore you to take action and to share the lessons you've learned. Meanwhile, something you could do to help us in our mission to help countless and thousands of small to medium family businesses the world over to be more prosperous, be more confident, and have a greater impact in the causes they support. And that is, of course, comment, like, and subscribe to this YouTube channel and to all of our other videos. And as always, be generous and share this with others. Take action today.